Ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to be moving on to the thematic session 2 here in the plenary hall, which is titled Regulatory Support in Different Countries for Revival of Utilities. And this session is going to be moderated by Mr. Jean-Michel Glachon. In fact, I should say Professor Jean-Michel Glachon, who's the director of Florence School of Regulation. And there he is. Let me very quickly now take you through brief profiles of our moderator and chair, Professor Jean-Michel Glachon, and our eminent panelists. So to very briefly introduce Professor Jean-Michel Glachon, the director of the Florence School of Regulation, holder of the Loyola di Palacio chair since 2008. And ladies and gentlemen, he worked in the industry and private sector before becoming professor at La Sorbonne. And he has been an advisor of DG Trend, DG Comp, and DG Research at the European Commission and of the French Energy Regulatory Commission as well. Now, with that, let me take the privilege of introducing our esteemed speakers. We have with us Mr. Dominique Jam, Director General, French Regulator for Energy. He's also a special advisor at CRE, the French Energy Regulatory Commission, since May 2017. And prior to that, he was CRE's Director for Networks, working in particular on networks, tariffs, and also market design, balancing, investment in interconnection, smart grids, etc. Warm welcome. Let me now introduce to you Mr. Luciano Martini, who's the Chairman, International Smart Grid Action Network. And he works for RSC Italy, where he's the Director of Transmission and Distribution Technologies Department. He has 25 years of experience on research and development activities dealing with renewable energies, superconductivity, and smart grids. Warm welcome to you, sir. Let me now introduce to you Mr. Roberto Zangrandi, who is the Secretary General, European Distribution System Operators. He's joined EDSO for Smart Grids as a special advisor on secondment from Enel Group of Italy. And he has been running the European Public Affairs Office in Brussels for ENEL between 2007 and 2004. Let me now introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, who is the Secretary General, European Distribution System Operators. He's joined EDSO for Smart Grids as a special advisor on secondment from Enel Group of Italy, and he has been running the European Public Affairs Office in Brussels for... I request you, Mr. Anand Singh, to please mute your microphone. Thank you very much. I'll request the speakers to please keep their microphones on mute. Thank you. Thank you very much. So as I was going on introducing our eminent speakers, we have with us Mr. Abel Didier Tella, who is the Director General, Association of Power Utilities of Africa. And ladies and gentlemen, he's current Director General of Association of Power Utilities of Africa, formerly known as UPDEA, created in 1970 with 56 active members in Africa and 25 affiliate members in Africa, Europe, America, and Asia, and some associate members. And previously, he worked for 25 years at SBEE, Benin National Power Utility as well. A warm welcome, sir. Let me take the privilege of introducing Dr. Rahul Tongia, Senior Fellow, CSCP, and Founding Advisor, ISGS. And he was on the faculty at Carnegie Mellon University for many years, and he's presently an adjunct professor at CMU. He's active in the domain of smart grids. He helped found the Smart Grid Task Force, Government of India, as well as the India Smart Grid Forum, which is a multi-stakeholder body chaired by the Ministry of Power. Warm welcome to you, sir. Let me now take the privilege of introducing Shri R.N. Sen, former chairman, West Bengal Electricity Regulatory Commission, a power industry expert he is, and has worked with some of the sector's biggest PSUs, including the Damodar Valley Corporation, DVC, and NTPC Limited. And in the past, he's held the position of chairman, DEC MCL, which is a joint venture of a coal mining company, CEO NTPC SAIL, managing director, NTPC Alstom, and others. Let me now introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Villarreal, who is an independent consultant with over 20 years of experience in the electricity industry, including over 10 years working for state electric regulatory commissions in California and Minnesota. He works on policy and regulatory guidance on matters relating to distributed energy resources, grid modernization, performance-based rate making, and distribution system planning. Warm welcome. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to hand over the proceedings to our moderator and our chair, Professor Jean-Michel Glachon. Sir, please take it over.
Many thanks to you, dear lady. And Very welcome to all our Indian friends. It's a big pleasure and an honor to work with India and the Indians since 3 years already. I hosted here in Florence the Indian European Smart Grid annual event, and now my school, France School, is part of the new energy platform that European Union and India are launching together. And it's very important to be together because we have so many challenges ahead of us in the energy sector and beyond the energy sector in the climate policy. We are missing Mr. Pujari. Mr. Pujari had to meet his minister for urgent matters, so I have to lightly introduce the session. The session is about the shock of COVID-19. In many countries, COVID-19 did reduce the consumption by the industry, the consumption by the commercial sector, while it also increased consumption by households. But in many countries, households are in a sense subsidized by the industry of the commercial sector. And then this period for many companies has been extremely difficult, if not uh, near to be lethal, like we have seen in some African countries, and that we have seen also in India. Of course, it's not the only type of shock or shocks that the electricity sector is facing. We have seen extreme weather shocks with fire in Australia or in California, with freezing waves in Japan or in Texas, but it's not obvious that weather shocks are of the same kind of COVID-19 shocks. And what we are discussing now in this session is the regulatory support. What kind of regulatory support in different countries for the revival of utilities? For example, what are the regulatory measures to balance the interest of the consumers on one side, while ensuring financial viability of utilities on the other hand? Is tariff increase the only solution? What are the investments needed for infrastructure upgrades, business continuity, quality of services in the post-COVID period? And what kind of regulatory support for adoption of new technologies and new business models to increase revenue, to optimize our asset, to reduce cost of operation? We will take each speaker in the order foreseen among speakers. Then we will start with Dominique Jam and we will end with Christopher Villarreal. Each speaker knows that he or she has 7 minutes. At 6 minutes, I will remind to each speaker only 1 minute left. And then we should have a bit of time to discuss. All of you, you have to know that at 6 p.m. India, I have to leave because I'm a university professor. I'm member of a PhD jury in Europe, and I cannot not to attend the PhD jury because it might invalidate the candidate defense. We are starting with Dominique Jam. Dominique Jam is also a compatriot, so I'm doubly happy to welcome him. He's Director General of the French Regulatory Commission. Dominique, you have the floor for 7 minutes, 6 plus 1.
Thank you very much, Jean-Michel. Actually, I thought I've got to 8 minutes and not 7, but nevertheless, I will try to share the document. Do you see it now?
For the moment, no, not yet. Yes, it's coming, but not.
It's
Yeah, we have
coming,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
And now I have to come with something which the diaporama, sorry. Is it good for you?
Yeah, we are
Okay.
waiting it. It should
Good.
come. It's not come yet. Yes, we have it.
Okay, so thank you very much. So very a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk today. We know in France that there is a special relationship between India and France regarding energy with the International Solar Alliance, and so it's I'm very honored to be here today. So, well, as you know, the electricity sector has a lot of monopoly activities. And so those monopoly activities have to be regulated. And this is why we are as a regulatory authority here. So CRE is the French Energy Regulatory Commission. And so we participate in the creation of European energy market. And regarding France, we ensure the proper functioning of the electricity and gas market.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I think your presentation is not in the presentation mode, but speaker presentation mode. If you can just change the setting.
What should I do?
From the top center display settings.
You see my presentation or not?
We see your presentation, Dominique. It will work. It's not it's not perfect, but it's good enough. We can understand you. We can see. Do not worry.
Okay, please go ahead in case there's a problem changing the mode. That's fine. Absolutely fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So just two parts. I will be very, very short, but trying to focus on the important matters. So the impact regarding French energy sector and what we as a national regulator, we have done for it. And also we have had a study at the European level, which I think is interesting and that I will share with you. So regarding France, well, we had actually real big fall of the consumption during the lockdown period, which were March, May, and this November. Whereas household consumption actually increased by a few percent because obviously people stayed at home. So we saw a huge fall of electricity wholesale market prices, which were last year it was around 40 euros per megawatt hour, and this year it was around 15 euros. So really, really low price for the French market, and it was the same with gas. With the gas was priced in March, April around 5-6 euro per megawatt hour, which rates to about $2 per MBTU, which is very, very low price for the European market. So huge decrease in the price of wholesale price of electricity and gas. And so as a consequence, when you were a supplier, well, you have your customer portfolio and then the consumption does fall. And then you have too much energy and you have to sell this surplus of energy on the market. And what you see in the market is very low prices. So our suppliers have sustained big financial losses, whether big suppliers or small suppliers, because it's a competitive market. So that's the main effect on supplier. Regarding network operators, they are all monopolies, and we have in France a special regulation that guarantee, whether they are NADs or RTE, the network operators have a guarantee of the revenue, the annual revenue. So in 2020, they have seen a loss of revenue because of the lower consumption, but this will be made up for in 2021 and 22 via a small increase in the network tariff. So this is very protective for them. Well, the counterparty for that is that when we set their tariffs, we are able to set the WACC at a relatively low level because they have this kind of guarantee, because maybe they are one of the few industrial actors in France that have no loss of revenue in 2020. So regarding their activities, obviously they focused on the high priority tasks, network development project necessary for security of supply, etc., connection works. But we saw delays in investment in network, which is obviously because of the lockdown, and also delays in the smart meter rollout, because we are now in the process of the rolling out of the Linky smart meters. So, but they got 3 months late because of the lockdown. But now they NAD thinks that they will be able to catch up and to complete the rollout as scheduled by the end of 2021. What we called, we called on network tariffs operator to delay the bills for suppliers, and also we also have an issue in 2020 with the amount of unpaid bills, which have been increased, especially for small businesses. And so in the next months, next years, we have to tackle this issue. We have already started to do so. All right, this is, I think now I go to the European level because, well, CRE, as the French regulator, is the leader of the working group on the effect of COVID and consequences of COVID at European level. So we have worked on that. We have a report that will be published in the next days. And so what we see out of 27 members, we see a lot of moratorium on disconnections reported by 18 countries. We also have deferral of energy bills reported by 8 countries, social welfare measures, 10 countries, aid for businesses, 15 countries, and also
a minute left, Dominique.
And taxes, fine, 10 countries. And so, well, this is a report that will be published in the next day, and that we have been leading the work on this report. What we have on suppliers at European level, full extent of the impact not yet clear. Well, as in France, in a lot of countries, increase of unpaid energy bills, and also on system operators. Well, every country in Europe has not the same system as in France with tariff renewal guarantee, but well, anyway, every operator, network operator, is regulated at the European level. So lessons learned. First, the European liberalized energy market has proven to be resilient. No problem, no issue with the security of the system. Network operators have been protected from the crisis, which is very, very important. Temporary ban on disconnection have been very used all over Europe. And well, as a conclusion, I can say that the role of regulators may be important in the coming months, especially on unpaid bills that have been increasing, and also some network operators that will ask for tariff increases. Well, thank you very much, Michel. I think I am on time.
To you, Dominique. Very interesting to see how it turned out in France. You see that depending the segment of the industry you are protected, you are not. Regulated grid suppliers, generators are living different lives, and also unpaid bills become a topic in itself. But we, with no transition, are going now to hear from Luciano Martini, International Smart Grid Action Network. So we assume a point of view of companies or industry. Luciano?
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me well?
I do hear you,
Okay,
Luciano.
very good. So I try to share my screen now, so you can see my screen in a moment.
In a moment, of course. We
Is
do
that fine?
see the screen.
Can you see the screen now?
I do.
Oh, very good. So I can start with my 7 minutes. Okay.
Please go.
Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And of course, I would like to thank the organizer of this important conference for inviting me to make a contribution to this session too. So first of all, as you know, Italy was one of the very first European countries facing the impact of COVID-19. Actually, COVID-19 started to spread in Italy from end of February 2020. The Italian government took a series of measurements to limit the virus diffusion. And due to the very critical situation, a very strict lockdown was imposed in Italy from beginning of March till beginning of May 2020. This, of course, has a huge impact on lives and economy, and we saw only some slow recovery in May, when some of these strict measures had been gradually released. This is just a chart that shows you the electric energy demand in Italy in 2020. So you see the strong decrease of the overall demand in 2020. And in particular, in the rest of the slide, you see that this was mostly affected in the months between March and July, with a peak in April, where nearly 17% reduction was experienced in a single month, with other months again with a strong reduction in demand of electricity. We as RSC perform a case study to monitor the situation during the lockdown in two different areas in the northern part of Italy, in the Milan city and the Brescia area. They have a quite different mix of loads, more tertiary part in Milan and more industrial load in Brescia. And these are the main outcomes from this study. You see that in mid-March, we had a nearly 20% reduction of the maximum load in the Milan area. And the situation was even heavier and more difficult in the Brescia area, where we experienced nearly a 40% reduction, mainly in the industrial sector load. So just a short summary of the lockdown effects. As stated by Terna, we had a decrease of about 28% in the load of load connected to high voltage network in March, 35% in April. That was the worst month at that time. And there was a situation even worse than that, because the railway sector was experiencing a 60% decrease of the consumption in April 2020. So this was really a big reduction. And then other reduction was experienced, of course, also for medium voltage and low voltage substation load, 10%, 17% again in April, and so on. So it was really a strong effect. In this slide, I want to highlight some curiosity. So the strong reduction in the generation by the thermal plants was really significant, and was in somewhat putting the system of Italy in a situation in the middle between where we are now and the situation we will be experiencing in 2030 due to the decarbonization and the high penetration of renewables. So in this case, we really had like experience a kind of flashover to 2025, where we will have a reduction of thermal generation and a strong penetration of renewables, so especially variable renewables with their intermittency and so on. So this is just a summary of the new system condition that we also will see even higher and stronger in the year 2030. So heavily reduced load, modification of type of load, of course, less industrial, more households, and so on because of the lockdown. And the strong penetration of renewables that are characterized by high variability, and they are mostly connected in the south of the country, mainly to low voltage and medium voltage network. Of course, this implies an increase in the reserve requirements. And of course, having less generation from traditional power plants, we have also some critical conditions that are also linked with the possibility of generation from variable renewable in a system that has a much smaller margin of reserve at this point. Of course, everything is also based on the fact that renewables are not fully predictable, and so we have also some error related to uncertainty to load forecast. This is to say that the system has been run in the year 2020 under very high challenges for what's related to the system security, adequacy, stability, voltage quality, and also cost effectiveness. So coming to the main point of this session, I would like to recall in 3 slides, which are the main measure, the main action that has been taken by the Italian regulatory authority, ARERA, in this period, in order to face the main impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the most important aspect that was taken by ARERA was really an impact that has very good consequences on the economic. So there was a possibility to implement a law that introduced a temporary reduction of a fixed part of a network tariff and also of a general system charges. And this, of course, was beneficial for the overall system. And it's important to say that a special fund has been established with the goal to provide the financial resources for regulatory intervention. And this was in favor of the final customer. Especially there was suspension of the bill in a few red zones, the ones that were strongly affected by lockdown, and also intervention for the supply of operators. Tariff reduction that was
1
made.
minute left.
Thank you. Thank you.
Luciano.
Tariff reduction that was also made was beneficial for more than 3.7 million low voltage connected business. And then there was also a provisional compensation to system operator because of the lockdown. I would like then to mention that some important measures from ARERA were also part of the future approach. So a more technical dialogue between ARERA and the gas and electricity DSO in order to evidence the problem related to COVID-19 that affected the quality of service and the tariff regulation problem. Some special measure was also taken related to COVID-19 in terms of avoiding penalty to DSO for lower quality of service. And it's important to say that incentive regulation to 2G second generation smart meters rollout has been adjusted due to the fact that some of the meter could not be replaced because it was not possible to assess the meter in the households. And some other incentive to both TSO and TSO was also related to quality of supply, and also some of the problems related to COVID-19 have been covered. So I come to the main conclusion, and the main conclusion is that the generalized lockdown was really having a strong impact on the system, and especially on the capability for system balancing due to the high penetration of variable RES, renewable energy sources. And then also there was a clear slowdown in all the projects that system operators were carried out in execution of the sector rules. That is clear. Is clear that is also important as a takeaway from this experience that there is a clear importance of a cooperation, a strong cooperation between political government and parliament, and technical regulatory authority. I would like to mention in the end that ARERA also intervened to redefine the objectives and the deadline of any project guided by the sector regulation. And there was also a need for a temporary suspension of a procedure for the interruption of public utility service that was related to non-payment of invoices. So it was an experience that we hope not to pass through again, but we are still in a situation of critical path, but we know how to overcome mainly of this defect and the problem. So now I stop there, and I thank you very much for your attention. I would like to acknowledge the support and the material that we received from ARERA for this presentation. Thank you so much.
Many thanks to Luciano, and many thanks to Luca, also a good friend of France School. It's very interesting to compare Italy and France. And one thing you made very clear, that in France, it impacted nuclear that you do not have in Italy. And in Italy, the opposite. It showed the importance of the renewables and how to manage the renewable into the management of the system. We are going to keep still in Europe, but we will go straight to the European level with Roberto, another good friend of France School, Roberto Zangrandi, being the Secretary General of the European Alliance or Association of Distribution System Operators. Roberto, you have the floor for 7 minutes, 6 + 1.
Yes, thank you very much, Michel. Thank you for inviting me, Reggie. Thank you, Kundu, for your precious support this morning. Luciano, please exit the sharing mode, otherwise I cannot share my my screen. Thank you,
Roberto.
very
so
much.
that was what I was trying to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I will attend your presentation. Thank you.
Yes. One second. There it is. This the I had planned a very short presentation, so don't get nervous. So I've got only one slide, and I do not know what you see in this moment.
For the moment, we see slide 1.
Okay, and it is not the right one. And
it can work this way, Roberto. We see the slide very easily, and it works. Ah, it disappeared.
Mr. Zangrandi, you are on mute actually.
sorry about this. Couldn't do this. We use these platforms every day, but it is always a confusing moment.
Previously, your slides were visible, so it was good. So you can go ahead with that.
Okay. So you should see the right one now. Okay, so you don't see anything, huh?
Not yet. It's black.
Not yet.
It's fine della presentazione.
Yes. Okay.
Voilà.
So
Okay.
you're seeing now?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we do.
Okay.
We do.
So yes, because of sorry about this. First of all, EDSO is the association grouping the leading DSO in Europe. We prepared with Euroelectric over the last 6 months of last year and presented it in mid-January, a very thorough study on the investment needs of the DSO. This study you can find on Euroelectric website. It is called Connecting the Dots, and on EDSO website. And both websites can give you the full perspective of this study that depicts the orientation of the DSOs toward investment that are there to enable the energy transition. As far as EDSO was concerned, we contributed heavily to this study and are happy to share it with Euroelectric. But before, in late spring and before the summer, we presented to the Energy Commissioner of the European Union, Mrs. Kadri Simpson, another study conducted by EDSO only with the support of Bain Consulting of Paris. So there we depicted what was the attitude of the DSOs after what we thought it could have been the end of the confinement and the first recovery after the COVID pandemic in, let's say, confinements and the limitation of activities that Luciano clearly showed with his slides. So where we stand is that we poured many of the experiences we gathered with that study in the Deloitte study that we are talking about. And we realized that we had huge problems in terms of regulatory needs to be implemented both at European level and national level. So I picked just one slide from our study and decided to put it here in order to have the clear perspective of what is needed and what it is needed in terms of action at the many levels. So there are three main areas: plan and execute investments. I will not entertain you on this because it is self-explaining, and you will find this slide on both websites. But I will focus on your attention, try to focus your attention on how to improve security of supply and automation, which is the prerequisite to transit to a more resilient and more effective management of the grids and the smart grids and the accumulation of the renewable and distributed sources into the grid, and enabling the transition in full, as it has been depicted by the European Commission. So, first of all, what is the DSO role? And we think that there is a central policy issue there that must be tackled, and it is the lack of development of the DSO role principle established by the Clean Energy Package. The Clean Energy Package is a massive piece of legislation that Europe delivered last year, and we felt a little bit neglected, if I must say, as DSOs, because the role, it is there, there are the principle, but there is no development so far and no implementation path. And we are working for this in terms of advocacy and in terms of projects that we are supporting. This requires on the regulatory actions level to facilitate an EU general framework for cybersecurity. And in the preceding panel, Mr. Levy explained exactly where is possible to implement the cybersecurity, and a series of other things. You see the European flag on your right and kind of a national flag, a white flag. So remember that there are 27 different national regulatory authorities performing in Europe, working together, certainly, but still having a national approach, a very much national approach. So we think that this is the very first step. And another essential step that we see to ensure the security of supply and automation is to have clear views on the remuneration framework for the DSO, which will be the central element in granting the transition. So we asked national regulators to enable forward-looking remuneration to deliver.
Go to conclusion, Roberto.
Yeah.
Only 1 minute left.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. And that is the title, Enable Forward-Looking Remuneration. Then the third and last step is how to enable the energy transition. Two main factors, flexibility and tariffs. Once again, for the flexibility, speed up the comprehensive regulatory framework. And for the tariffs, we know that the electricity tariff should be more cost reflective. That is a nice word. That is a nice word that we started using exactly at the Florence School of Regulation a few years back, but we still have to implement it fiercely and hardly. So sorry for the technical problems at the beginning. It was great to be here with you today. Very interesting high-level discussion. Thank you very much. And thank you, Jean-Michel.
Many thanks to you, Roberto. So to make clear to our Indian audience, you see that in Europe, we have two-level regulation, two-level set of rules. We have the European level, like you have a federal in India with Mr. Pujari, and we have the state level, France, Italy, as you have state level in India, the same. So we look very, very similar. And we are back to India with the next speaker being Mr. Sen, former chairman of West Bengal Electricity Regulatory Commission. Mr. Sen, you have the floor for 6 minutes plus 1. Mr. Sen? Mr. Sen.
হ্যাঁ স্যার আপনাকে ডাকছি আপনি হ্যালো হ্যালো হ্যাঁ
Hello.
বলুন।
Hello, yeah, I am. Please, next slide, please. Hello, good evening, everybody. My speaker was muted, so yeah. Now I will start with the support what we require for this from the regulatory side. We have divided into two parts. One is the short-term support, that is allow the licensee to utilize the contingency fund available for 3 years moratorium and refund in monthly installment. In our West Bengal Electricity Regulatory Commission, we have a fund available for meeting such contingency. So I feel that that same fund can be given to those distribution licensee to make up the shortfall what they have seen during this pandemic, and this can be given for 3 years moratorium, and then subsequently it can be taken back. Then allow the licensee to recover the lockdown period unrealized tariff through equal monthly installments. This will also benefit both the consumer and the licensee. Now, Government of India has already given 1.2 lakh crore of assistance to all the distribution licensee through government financial institute like Power Finance Corporation and Rural Electricity Corporation. So whatever money has been given to them, the interest may be allowed as a pass-through to the tariff, so they don't have to feel the pinch of the paying interest for the amount they have to really pay to the generating company because of the shortage and receivable from the consumers. In case of private licensee, the amount may be considered in case-to-case basis, those who have taken loan in a similar line. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, now we are talking about the long-term solution, what it can be. What we feel that there is a disruption in the tariff, the receivable, because of the reduction in the commercial and industrial load. In India, our commercial and industrial consumer, they are all charged heavily, and their money is basically utilized for subsidizing the agriculture and the domestic consumers. So what we propose that the tariffs should be based on different voltage wise, not on consumer category wise. So if we go for different voltage wise tariffs, so there will be hardly any impact on the change of mix of the consumer, which was because of any pandemic or any other such disturbances. Then ensure common tariff for all category of consumer in the same voltage level. The government to subsidize the agriculture, MSME, domestic sector from the collected electricity duty. Government should impose a duty. Already we have a electricity duty in at West Bengal, and most of the states are having electricity duty based on the consumption. So whatever may be the source of supply, it may be open access, it may be their own captive, it may be their own auxiliary consumption. So they have to pay a duty. So based on the duty, government can collect the duty and enhance the duty little bit. And also in case of shortfall, they can give some fund, and they should subsidize them through direct benefit transfer, which already in discussion at the Government of India level. The lower tariff will eliminate the threat of flight of prime consumer like railways, MSC, industries, etc. Next slide. By offering competitive tariff, the need for sourcing cheaper power through open access and captive generating units will not be there. So industrial consumer, for industrial consumer, automatically the existing licenses, their power requirement will keep on increasing, and they will be in a position to supply more power and get more revenue from there. This will favor highly efficient plant for larger capacity like ultra mega power projects, the substantially reducing the cost of generation and coal consumption and carbon footprint of our country. Basically, when we will be making the industrial and the commercial tariff at par with the generation cost, so automatically the captive power station will not be operating, which are generally the cost of generation is higher, but because of the differential tariff of the commercial industrial tariff vis-a-vis the cost of their generation, so they So their highly inefficient plan will be not required, and will be in a position to generate much higher efficient at a lower cost. Ultimately, stakeholders, including utilities, will be benefited, and Discom will not have the threat of losing high-end consumer, and consumer will be getting the best tariff. So these are the things which will really help the, in a long term, help both the licensee and the consumer, and also the industry at a large. Next slide. Now, there is a question whether tariff increase is the solution. I feel tariff increase can be thought once we really exhaust all these options. The consumer tariff has measured impact of AT&C losses, cost of capital, and O&M cost. Now, we have seen that some of our previous, speaker has presented how they have reduced the AT&C losses in case of BSS Jumuna, BSS Rajdhani, and by introducing the IT-enabled support. So we propose that same thing must be done by all the licenses, introduce IT-enabled support through ERP, prepaid smart meter, to online data capturing for assisting recovery of cost as per regulation. Now, ERP will basically help to get the real exactly what is to be the cost, not that based on some numbers and other thing. It should be on real-time basis or it should be on online basis to ensure reduction AT&C losses through high voltage distribution system and aerial
To
bus.
conclude, Mr. Sen, only 1 minute left.
Okay, just I'll go a bit fast. Then ensure reduction in technical losses through phase balancing, load balancing, etc. All these components are tweaked for determining tariff for different voltage level, then there will be substantial reduction. And implementing of smart grid technology, as indicated in the next slide, will also help us to reduce the cost of supply. Next slide. So what you see that all those things what I am explaining here, they've already been explained by some of my earlier speakers. What as a initiative, both in the European side, also in some of the highly efficient Indian distribution. I will not take some time for reading all those things, but basically these are all those new things which will make the consumer also highly, delighted, and also will go for ensuring that the best utilization of the power by minimizing the requirement during peak hours, by optimizing the power ability to off peak hours, etc. And this will really ensure that the totality, the whole, power scenario will go for a total change, and we will be in a position to really ensure that both the cost of power, service to the consumer, and the health of the licensee is properly addressed. Next slide. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. So, in case of any question, I'll be eager, I'll be happy to answer it. Thank you very
Many,
much
many
for your
thanks.
patient hearing.
Many, many thanks to you, Mr. Sen. It's very good to have experienced speakers like you, former chairman, and to see what your state did, short-term, long-term, tariff increase, extremely interesting. We are going to be able to compare with another country, even another groups of country, because now we will give the floor to Mr. Tella, being Director General of the Association of Power Utilities of Africa. So we will have a fantastic feedback on this huge continent, Africa. Mr. Tella, you have the floor. You know the rule: 6 minutes plus 1 equal 7. Mr. Tella, we see your slides. We only need your voice. We are seeing your slides, Mr. Tella. What we need is your voice.
It's very faint. I believe we can hear it, but is there a way to up the gain?
It will be better if you can use a headphone, sir, or an earphone.
Yeah, you should do like me, Mr. Tella, headphone.
Professor, is it okay if we move to the next speaker?
Okay, for me it's okay.
Mr. Abel, is it okay if we move to the next speaker and then we'll come back to you till the time you have your settings?
Okay, so we go for Mr. Rahul Tongia, a fellow at CACP and also a part of the Indian Smart Grid Forum.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
And like you, I choose to use the headset. So thank you, everyone. I do not have PowerPoint, so maybe that's a good thing. And I hope I don't need all the time, so there's more time later for discussions. But I wanted to just contrast and give a few specific points, both comparing global experiences and what happens in India and what happened. And I start with the first question, which is how much of what transpired with COVID was temporary and how much is permanent? I think that's the first thing that countries need to figure out. The second related issue is if there are two lenses that people use. One is technical, kilowatt hours. So unlike many crises, we don't have a problem meeting load. We actually had a fall in demand. But in addition to the larger challenge on the technical side is the financial. And so on the financial, tying it to point one, the first question is, are we staring at liquidity problems or solvency problems? And by that, I mean, is it just something that'll work itself out? So for example, we heard how in many countries, Italy's experience, or even in India, you couldn't go get paid, put the bill, you couldn't read the meter, you couldn't get collection. In theory, these are things that will solve themselves out over time. There are some nuances that are more critical, but that's not a solvency problem. Unfortunately, we do have a very fundamental series of challenges that are related to solvency in Indian utilities. So using the term utilities to mean the distribution utilities specifically, as opposed to the generators, they have been squeezed for many, many years. The prices were not set up high enough to meet their costs. Everyone blames the utilities for inefficiency and high AT&C losses. I actually have a lot of sympathy for discoms because they are constrained both by regulators in price setting, but also by the states who don't pay subsidies on time. We have tracked them in a major paper at CSEP. And we also end up having a lot of focus on the generators. So clearly the generators need to be paid, but then you have to ask yourself, why are the discoms, the distribution companies, not paying the generators? It's not because they're willfully malicious. They actually don't have the cash on hand. And so cash accounting is really the key. And we find a lot of challenges when we use book accounting or accrual basis accounting, as is the regulatory requirement within India. Another observation comparing the past to the future is a lot of our costs are fixed costs. In India, when you had the lockdown, the demand fell. Almost all of the reduction in supply came out of the thermal or coal power assets. Renewables are cheap, free at the margin. Hydro didn't fall. Nuclear doesn't really fall much. Even gas did not fall that much. A lot of the fall came out of thermal. But the savings to the utilities were nowhere near as much as you would think because they had a lot of fixed costs where they were paying for capacity essentially that they did not utilize. So that's another puzzle that needs to be thought through post-COVID, and that really injects an urgency into this process, because over time, a lot more of your grid is going to turn into fixed costs. Renewables are entirely a fixed cost game. Even coal, if you really dig deep, we have a book on the future of coal in India. We dig into it more, no pun intended. And ultra supercritical or supercritical power plants are disproportionately capital costs. Fuel costs fall, especially for pithead plants where you're not paying for transportation. And even mining and transport are fixed costs, as opposed to things that if you reduce your offtake, the costs fall. So what did other countries do, and what are options ahead for India or Africa or many parts of the world? One of the real phrases out there is, let's build back better. Let's use this as an opportunity to do, for example, in the US, they're talking of a Green New Deal. So to summarize, the New Deal was about intervention to really change the relationship of the government towards its responsibility towards its citizens, to emphasize public works. That was the US model. So now can we invest into green is what this opportunity is, according to many places. One of the cautions I have is fiscal space and economic implications. In India, you don't have sufficient cash easily to fund it. There is no surplus. And so we're talking about loans. And then the question becomes at what terms and who will be left paying for it. Second problem is one of equity, both senses of the word. First is, are we propping up equities in the value proposition stream? So the New York Times had a very nice deep dive article a few weeks or a month ago about, in the pandemic, you had extra cash injected. You had lower expenses because people weren't going out as much. And so there was a surplus between these two, 2:1 ratio of several $trillion into the economy. And what that did is it propped up certain classes of assets, especially equities. So what did happen on the utility side was you had an extension of the investment tax credit, for example. So support mechanisms that have been identified for green have been agreed to by most countries in the world. And if not agreed to, it's just happened and continued. The questions for India especially, but other countries, is, will demand come back in the exact same way? So COVID was a reduction in carbon, which in some ways is a good thing, but that's like saying your cure for dandruff is going bald. You know, it's not the best thing that people want as the cure for reducing carbon emissions. So what will not only the electricity demand look like, but what will be the financial implications? Because in India,
1 minute left, Raoul.
Yes, residential and commercial users are priced differently. So you've had a shift of usage between these segments. So what we do need to do is stabilize our revenues. We need to figure out the right social equilibrium that we need in pricing that remains fair. In summary, we had a strained system before, but one of the best phrases to describe black swans like COVID is, a catastrophe usually doesn't create new faults. It usually exposes underlying ones. So you cannot have a resilient system, which is one that is perpetually hand to mouth, where you don't have enough cash flows to keep the system liquid, create a buffer. And as Mr. Sen pointed out, you have equity issues or pricing plan issues as well that we need to grapple through. So what we really need is more data on understanding what happened, not just at the load balancing level, but at the financial level. We need to figure out the right instruments, which is the combination of new money, changing the returns. Who will share the pain? It should not be just discoms. We need generators, end users, all of the above sharing this equitably. Some writing off, and then some structural changes because the past equilibrium perhaps wasn't working. Thank you.
Remarkable comments, Raoul. I didn't know you before the session. Congrats. If you had the courage to write it into 3 or 4 pages, I will be delighted to publish at my school. Now we are back to Africa with Mr. Tella. Mr. Taylor, do you feel equipped to jump and to come to the scene to tell us how you saw the crisis in Africa and how to get out of it? Mr. Taylor?
I think he has been disconnected.
Bon, nevertheless, we have Mr.
No,
Christopher.
he's there now.
Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
We do hear you, Mr. Taylor.
Okay. I share quickly my screen. Sorry for this inconvenience.
It happens. It happens. It happens to one of us.
Why?
You might need to just change the slides or load them. The screen is visible. So if you could go to your PowerPoint.
But I don't have the...
We are seeing your screen. Huh?
If you can share the presentation with me, this is Kundu from ISGF. If you can share the presentation with me, I can share the screen for you.
Or if you could load your PowerPoint, perhaps, if you have it, or PDF.
I have it. I have the PowerPoint, but I don't have to. Yes, now it's going on. Sorry. Wait.
It's coming.
Fortunately,
they are French words. Huh? Because the screen is saying accès rapide, which is not really what we can conclude.
Malheureusement, c'est au bon moment, au mauvais moment que j'ai le problème. J'étais connecté depuis le matin. C'est gênant.
Si vous pouvez ouvrir votre PowerPoint, ça va marcher.
Oui, je veux l'ouvrir rapidement. Ouais. J'ai changé d'ordinateur en fait. J'ai dû changer d'ordinateur.
So I think the problem may be when you look, it says I'll pull up recent documents. You're so productive that there are so many recent documents.
Mr. Tella is a director general, so he has hundreds of docs. That's normal.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll start not wasting time. What I would like to share with you. Oh la la. What I do, I will send the presentation to you, and then you share with us. It's better.
Maybe we can shift to Christopher Villarreal.
Yes.
Okay, so we are shifting to Christopher Villarreal from the US. I assume very early in the US. Christopher, are you with us?
I got caught without turning the mute off. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I'm hearing you, Christopher.
Great. So thank you for inviting me to participate today in today's India Smart Grid Week. And thank you to Reggie for inviting me again to participate. So I don't have any slides, so you'll have to look at my face.
Okay.
So what I wanted to talk about today is a bit of what Rahul was just talking about these unexpected events that are going to happen, similar to COVID. But in this case, we're going to talk a bit about what happened last week in the state of Texas, which I think has a interesting, or can be used as an example of what happens with when big events happen across a geographically sparse area of the country. So the state of Texas, which is the second largest state in the United States, as well as the second most populous state in the United States, last week had a significant blackout occur across the independent region of the state called ERCOT. And the impact of this event was directly related to some weather changes that typically do not happen in the state of Texas. The state of Texas in the southern part of the United States is usually a very hot portion of the state, very humid, and their system is built to expect a summer peak. What happened last week was an extended cold front where cities like Houston experienced temperatures that are unusual to the area, approaching 0 degrees for 0 degrees Fahrenheit over several days. And this ended up straining the entire system across the state of Texas, and especially in the ERCOT region. As ERCOT announced last week and over the past few days before testimony before the Texas State Legislature, they came within 3 to 4 minutes of entirely losing its system and resulting in blackouts across the system because of frequency drops in the system. So in the US, our frequency sits around 60 hertz. And at points during the worst part of the system, the ERCOT region's frequency dropped to 59.3. And ERCOT said that if it had lasted longer or if it continued to drop, the entire ERCOT region would have gone out and they would have had to gone to black start capabilities, which would have taken several hours, if not days, to then restart the entire ERCOT area of Texas. And ERCOT serves roughly 85% of the state of Texas. And so one of the main reasons why this happened was the lack of planning. So ERCOT's peak winter forecast was scheduled to be around 67 gigawatt hours of electricity. During the height of the event, ERCOT's forecasted winter system peak for last week was going to be closer to 77 gigawatts. So 10 gigawatts higher than they had ever forecasted the winter system would hit. Couple that with a significant amount of thermal systems already out for maintenance because in winter they're not expected to be used that often. ERCOT ended up having a shortage of 46 gigawatts of thermal power, mostly gas, but some coal as coal stacks froze, and some nuclear units as some of the water systems froze as well because it's Texas and they're not expecting this cold temperatures. So there was a significant lack of weatherizations across the system, both for the thermal fleet as well as for the wind units. So how was there a lack of fuel? This is the state of Texas, after all. This is the energy state in the United States. Well, again, because the state of Texas does not anticipate having significantly cold weather during winter, there ended up being a competition for available gas throughout the state. And the gas system was prioritizing heating uses. So there's a significant amount of gas heating in Texas, and the gas system then prioritized heating people's houses rather than sending it to the electricity system because, again, there was not anticipated to have this much gas usage in the wintertime in the state of Texas. In addition to just that, the gas system itself had problems as wells froze, other parts of the gas distribution system froze because, again, Texas is not anticipating significant cold weather across the state for an extended period of time. So what this has caused is a significant discussion now going on across the United States, both at the state level as well as at the federal level, to figure out how best can these systems be planned and be prepared for new events that are going to happen across the system in response to climate change, as well as the ongoing issues related to COVID. So some of the conversations going on in Texas right now is, how to weatherize the system better. Texas has some unique structures in place. It is a fully restructured state with full retail choice. So the distribution utility does not own generation, and the distribution utility does not serve electricity to consumers. They are the poles and wires company. And so there's been questions about whether that was a contributing cause. Additionally, the ERCOT region operates an energy-only market as opposed to a capacity market. The result of the energy-only market means that you have a significant higher price in order to incentivize construction of transmission or generation. So during the event for at least 2 days, the ERCOT energy-only market hit the price cap of $9,000 a megawatt hour, and that lasted for several days. The impacts of that high price is that consumers, some consumers felt the full brunt of that $9,000 a megawatt hour price. And what we're now seeing over the past few days is as the bills come due for all the power purchased, we're seeing some municipals that are already claiming hardship to pay the bill. We saw one co-op just yesterday declare bankruptcy as they have a $1.8 billion debt.
Left.
They have a $1.8 billion debt to cover all the electricity expenses that they had to procure during the crisis. So there's a lot of questions that Texas has to answer, but there are very similar questions to what the rest of the country has to answer, predominantly around the question of better planning. So as the weather changes continue to evolve, utilities, states, regulators, and our regional transmission organizations have to better plan for changing system conditions due to weather and climate. And this may be, I won't say exacerbated, but this will impact significantly as we continue to electrify our system. So as an example, because of, if we continue to electrify things like heating, we may see portions of our country shift from a summer peaking to a winter peaking system, like ERCOT is forecasted to become, with a lot more electrified transmission and heating and transportation. We also need to look at the role that new technology can play. Reliance on gas resources when there is competition for it during extreme periods of time has proven to be a challenge. So how do we make better use of things like distributed energy resources, including energy storage and microgrids, to provide higher levels of resilience and reliability in the face of changing conditions across the system? I also want to note that what this has highlighted is the significant interdependency across the system of not just the electric system, but the electric system relying upon a gas system to have fuel available. And then the water systems across the state of Texas relying on the electricity in order to ensure clean water. There are portions of Mississippi and Texas which are still under boil orders to boil water because the water is not safe. So all this is to say is that
Chris.
We need better planning and responsiveness for changing conditions.
I appreciate the comments you are making. We know that electricity systems will face crises. We know that they will face a new crisis. And we know that in this crisis, electricity systems are coming multi-sectoral. They have to take into account electrification of heating, they have to, or cooling. They have to take into account electrification of mobility. They have to take into account the feed of gas to work themselves. They have to take into account that we might have demand response, etc., etc. And all of this is new. And all of this has to work together, and we have to learn how to make it work together. Now we are coming back to Mr. Tella in Africa. Mr. Tella, do you feel ready to tell us how your companies, the power utilities in Africa, did cross the crisis and how they think they will escape it, if they can escape it in the future? Mr. Tella? Mr. Tella, we do not hear you yet. Mr. Tella? We do not hear you at all, Mr. Tella. There is no sound. Nothing, no voice, no. No, no voice. We do not hear anything. There is no voice, Mr. Stella, no sound.
Previously, where you were there, that in that system, it was fine.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
It does not work. There is
So
a lot of noise.
we could hear you, but you had two connections and they were feeding back into each other.
Also, they connect one.
Kindly disconnect from one of the device.
And now? And now?
Could you speak again, sir?
We see what is real time. Huh? It's a typical constraint of the electricity world. Real time is real time. So Chris, I will come back to you because for the moment we do not have Mr. Stella. In your opinion, Chris, what is universal in the Texas crisis? What should all of us know and think and do differently because this crisis happened in Texas, which is a state leading in the US for energy affairs?
Right. So I think one of the universals that we do need to take into account of is, we can plan and we need to do better planning, but we can't always account for emergency conditions that happen without much awareness in advance. Something like COVID or an extreme weather event in an area that doesn't anticipate that. So looking at diversifying our systems, looking at investing in the infrastructure that is capable of accommodating and using things like distributed energy resources, being able to move wind and store solar for these other time periods.
So it should be quite costly to implement.
It could be. And one of the questions that has begun to float from the federal government is who should pay for this? Should all this investment that Texas, for example, may need to invest in, should that be entirely borne by the rate base in Texas?
Of course.
Or should it be borne more by taxpayers across the country?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. Very good question. Is Mr. Tella ready to intervene? Mr. Tella, do you feel ready? Mr. Tella, we do not hear you, Mr. Tella. But We do not hear you, Mr. Taylor. But what we can see from Texas, and it was the same in California, it's not the fact that you are a rich state. Texas is very rich. California is extremely rich. It's not the fact that you are rich which protects. Which protects is organization, planning, prevention, etc., etc. A lot of work, a lot of coordination, but the same with Australia. We have also Japan. Japan, they got a crisis in January. We're thinking, my God, will the system break on Japan or not? So I think we are learning a lot of things. How will we make it a new doctrine for electricity system resilience? We will see. A good report was made by International Energy Agency in October last year on resilience of electricity systems and the fact that we have to work on it much more. Mr. Tella, do you feel ready? Mr. Tella? It seems that not. It seems that it is broken. I'm very sorry, Mr. Tella, because we have loved having Africa. On the top, you are a French-speaking African, and of course, I'm sharing something with you. Do not feel guilty. It happens to all of us. Yesterday afternoon, my own computing system at my institute told me, you won't be able tomorrow to speak in India. It's impossible. But they found a way during the night, and at 8:30.
Sorry to interrupt you, Professor. Is it possible if I request Sudha Satta to give a call to Mr. Tella, and then he can probably speak on the phone, and that will be audible. Sudha, can you make that audible?
You have 6 minutes with me. You can continue after my departure. I have to quit at 6 p.m. sharp India's time. But of course, Mr. Tella has the floor immediately, of course.
Sudha, can you give him a call? Yes, Sudha.
Perhaps while we're waiting, you could throw out any questions or queries you have, Jean-Michel.
Ooh, my God. I think that personally, we are entered into a new type of electricity system. So the lessons we know from the past are right, but they don't tell us exactly what to do. What I call the new electricity system, as I said, is multi-sectoral. We have gas feeding electricity, but electricity feeding gas, we have seen in Texas. We have a part of the system being thermal. It is centralized, central dispatch. But a big part of the system now is not thermal, is not dispatched with renewables. So it's local. So even in California, they were saying we should go to islandization of Californian electricity. If we have many islands, we will resist better to shocks. And it's not all. We have seen also that we have centrality and decentralization. Many things are become by force local, as distribution utilities. They have to manage their local loads. They have to manage their local congestions. And when they face shocks, either they are able to manage the shocks at this local dimension or they are not. But whom is able to take big decisions if decisions have to be local and central for electricity, local and central for gas? Nobody knows. Even in Texas, gas is separated for electricity. And in many countries, it is the same. But what said also Christopher said that if we digitalize a lot consumption, we digitalize a lot demand response, then we have more possibilities to face shocks, to face uncertainties. But it has to be thought by someone. It has to be thought somewhere. And the last of the last, I run 6 workshops between digital world and energy here in my institute. And it's more and more striking that a big part of the electricity system is not electrical anymore. It's purely digital. It's purely digital data, digital access, digital database, analytics, artificial intelligence. And this cannot be run as an electricity system. It's something else. It's a digital system. And the understanding of how to run the digital part of the electricity system is not very advanced. And in many concrete conditions, the electricity regulators do not have the good IT engineer, artificial intelligence engineers to understand these novelties and to manage adequately these novelties, the database, the interoperability of the databases, etc., etc. That's the way I see it. I see that we are entering into a new electricity system being multi-sectoral, multi-level, and with a big component of digital affairs. And we do not know yet how to manage this. And it's what we face when we have big crisis. Big crisis is only revealing that we do not know exactly how to manage our systems. That's my view. If you wanted to have it, Raoul, you have it. You can comment, Raoul. You can agree, disagree, say the opposite.
No,
I'm
I think.
a professor. I'm open to any.
Thank you. No, I would love to hear some other people also just come in. See, everyone agrees that change is afoot, but you also had change afoot pre-COVID. So you've got multiple dimensions. There's digitalization, decarbonization, and so forth. And what
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Tongia. We've got Mr. Teller on the phone. Mr. Teller?
I have to leave in 1 minute, so I let Raoul manage the session. Raoul, you are manager of the session. I'm leaving in 1 minute. Mr. Teller, you are very welcome. And you have the floor.
Thank you, Jean-Michel.
Okay, I'll go straight to the skip this slide. Skip this one. Next slide. Okay, what happened that? No. Back.
You could mute the speaker, I mean, whoever is receiving it and connecting their phone, I think. So it's not, it's feeding back. No, not mute, but isolate. Anyways, please continue. You'll have to unmute. You'll have to unmute. It's feeding back, but let's try. You'll have to unmute.
Akash, please unmute Mr. Taylor. Akash?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, already unmute.
We're still seeing it muted and not hearing anything.
Go ahead. Escape, go back to the previous slide.
I'll meet my
previous slide. Yeah, you can start from here.
Okay, beginning of the 90s, what happened that the development finance institution, World Bank and the IMF, they offer conditional loan to many countries with a structural adjustment and forced to bring some change to the power sector.
Tell them to mute him from the computer. Tell them to mute from the computer.
I have to mute my computer.
They can do.
Can you hear me when I mute my computer?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, this is better now. Better now.
Okay. So after 20 years of reform in the power sector in Africa, APUA conducted a study on the reform. And we focused on 90 countries to find what reform brings to the power sector. Later on, we updated this study another 10 years after. Next slide. Next slide.
Yeah.
So, on the other side, the African Development Bank introduced a new partnership for energy in Africa in 1916. So, the year after, they launched the Sustainability Utility Transformation promotion of discourse resource planning.
That's okay.
Second,
It's all
the sector and utility governance management. Third, the sector and organizational reform and financial sustainability, human capital development, and smart partnership. Next slide. So this was the condition in the power sector before pandemic. I'm talking before pandemic. So when we studied the reform, we realized that the standard model promoted by the FIs could not be a panacea. So they were promoting the commercialization of electricity,
we are late by 10 minutes. 6:15 will start.
restricting national monopoly, creating independent regulation, opening sector to the private sector, and introducing competition in the market. So when we studied this standard model, the prescription form proposed by the structural adjustment could not meet all the needs of the sector. So a coordination regulatory framework was needed. Next slide. And the power sector in Africa still largely retained by traditional monopoly like vertical integrated. 12 among 42 countries included in the study open and peddling the sector. That was Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, Egypt, Angola, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Togo, Ethiopia, and Lesotho. So many countries introduced regulatory authority in the country. So 33 among 42 countries have established a regulator. So opening up the capital investment flow in the African power sector and in first front of the reform goals. Next slide. So when pandemic hit Africa last year, the measure introduced by the member states to fight COVID, first, the impact on utility was a drop of electricity demand and change in electricity consumption pattern. So the industry was not working normally where people stayed at home and consuming more domestic load. So the revenue also reduced because industry were not working, but people were at home consuming. So the large consumer were not consuming normally when the domestic are consuming, and they were given moratorium to pay. So the financial situation of utility worsened during the pandemic. The project delay, many ongoing projects, pipeline and interconnector was delayed on the continent. Operational challenges, the utility operation and network maintenance, customer service was to be changed during the pandemic. So, next slide. What was the response of Africa to the pandemic? And not skip the slide concerning the political and economic context of reform and effect of reform on the tariff. I'll come to that. I'll focus more on the pandemic. Next slide. So the African power sector response was that first, early March, a meeting of the African Union Commission and the APUA set a committee to face with the impact of the pandemic on the sector. So we have virtual consultation before the minister met in May. The minister met in May to prepare now an urgent recovery plan. So the first extraordinary session of Bureau of the Technical Committee on Energy in Africa met 12th of May by video conference, and they make a declaration with a recovery plan. Next slide. So the stakeholder indicate a list of short-term, medium-term, and long-term agenda to face the post-pandemic situation. First, the member states to put measures in place to facilitate power utility as well as off-grid and mini-grid service provider to overcome impact of low electricity demand and drop of revenue. They have to ensure continuity of provision of electricity to low-income population during the crisis, and also handle the non-payment of those people not to cut power to low revenue people. They need to explore ways to reduce fuel costs on electricity generation in line with the drop of international fuel price, to provide incentive for continuation of electricity, energy efficiency, and energy access efforts, to explore ways to subsidize clean cooking fuel and technology to reduce indoor air pollution. So to put measures in place to ensure business continuity, to make available and sufficient energy to face the pandemic, and to implement strategies to promote universal affordable energy for all by mobilizing public and private funding to meet national, continental, and global targets after COVID pandemic. Next slide. So the takeaway is that talking about reform, the prescriptive approach of standard model have not been the expert panacea for the power sector in Africa. Power sector reform and development have been slow and demanding process in most parts of the world is continuing process. Facing the future, require proactive policy, regulatory, market, and institutional reform transformation, and precedently breakthrough in prices of solar and wind energy in the past decade have spurred African countries to take advantage, and by now well-established variable renewable generation technology. So disruptive technology are opening new opportunities and provoking the need for regulatory policy, economic tools, and harness them on the post-COVID period. So those takeaways mean that despite Africa have not been suffering as other countries from COVID, the post-COVID response is also a response to the economic crisis which will follow the COVID-19 period for power utility, knowing that talking about tariff, lastly, I come back to a slide that I skipped. Only 4 countries in Africa have cost-reflective tariff before pandemic. So this issue will be critical in the after-COVID time. So So sorry for all the disturbance. I think that I have to revise my system before the next meeting to avoid such situation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Tella. And with that, I'd like to thank all our speakers, our esteemed speakers, our chair, moderator, Professor Jean Berchon has already left, but I'd like to thank him very much for steering this wonderful session. And ladies and gentlemen, our eminent panelists, thank you once again